I've raced in Formula One and I became a world champion in sports cars, a category I fell in love with after F1 when I thought everything was lost. You come to the end of what you see as everything you'd ever pinned hopes on to get to Formula One. And when that comes tumbling down and the doors shut in your face, you worry that, well, I'm still in my 20s and what do I do now? To find then a new lease of life, to then fall in love with it so much and to win a world championship just felt like everything you'd put your heart and soul into actually had meaning.
Welcome everyone to this week's F1 Beyond the Grid, and I'm delighted to say that my guest is Anthony Davidson, and it's great to see you. Thank you for your time.
It's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, and you retired from racing 4 years ago. Do you still think like a racing driver, or are things a bit different now?
No, I definitely still think like a racing driver. I think I'm still as annoying to be around from my wife's point of view anyway. You've got that. You're so driven to doing everything as perfect as you can, self-analytical, always trying to get the best out of yourself. You're super competitive. I don't think that element ever leaves your mind. So although I'm not competing behind the wheel anymore, you find other ways to find that drive that you had when you were driving the car, just to get the best out of yourself in everything that you do. And
does the sim work that you now do for Mercedes, does that scratch that competitive itch?
That's a good question, because I believe it does. The sims are getting more and more realistic all the time, so I do feel like after a solid day's work behind the wheel in the Mercedes sim that it does scratch that itch a bit in terms of what the skill sets you need to drive a car and put the car on the edge. Yes, you don't have the G-forces and there's a lot of the physical side of things that's missing, but like I say, the details of getting as close to a perfect lap as you can try to achieve lap after lap in it's a very static environment that's not shifting like the real world. It means that it's even more down to the emphasis, more down to what you do in your driving, because there's less to hide behind like there is in the real car. So every lap that fluctuates is purely down to you in lap time, rather than real life. You can have turbulence and tyre wear and the wind picks up and the track gets hotter and more rubber goes down, and lots of elements can shift your performance from lap to lap even in the real car. So in the sim, you find you really have to chip away at the lap times and then maintain that level throughout the day, which is that element of it that doesn't change at all from the real car.
You say the sims are getting better and better. How long would it take you to get up to speed in the W16 if Toto said, Anthony, we need you to go and do a few laps?
So I drove which W was it? It was the 2021 car. And is it the W12? I think it was the W12. Yeah, around Austin. So it's a track I know, but I only know Austin COTA from the World Endurance Championship, the sports cars. And so the fastest thing I'd ever driven around there was the LMP1 cars, the Toyota LMP1. So that was about 10, 12 seconds slower than an F1 car at the time. So that's the only reference I had. So I'd obviously done thousands of laps around there in the F1 car, including the W12, of course. So when I got behind the wheel, of course, like the steering wheel is the steering wheel. That's what you use in the sim. I know the functionality of it. I know pretty much what every button does. But the lap times, I only had 5 laps in the car, and it was on Academy tyres. So my fastest lap actually came on the first lap, and I was around 2 seconds slower than Lewis, who did 10 laps that day. So that was after 7 months of not driving anything. By that point, I'd already retired. And I was quite pleased with that, because just in 5 laps to do that, and that goes to show, I don't think I could ever have got that close without knowing what the car could do in the virtual world.
Just out of interest, what happened on laps 2, 3, 4 and 5 if you were quickest on the first lap?
We had some problems with the state of charge of the battery. I think it deployed too much. There's some anomaly going on with the software. So it deployed too much. That's one element. So that was good to feel how much you really rely on the electrical element of these power units. But then on top of that, I just killed the Academy tyres too much. It was in midsummer, so the track temp was almost 50 degrees, and I had never driven those before. So they basically just grained up in the first lap even. So as I was getting better, the car was getting slower.
Tell us a little bit more about the sims, because you've been driving F1 sims for 25 years almost now, isn't it? In what areas have they improved?
Oh wow!
I mean, like, it's everywhere, obviously, but
it's every. I mean, the one element that hasn't improved that much has been the graphics. Surprisingly, you would have thought that above everything else that would have improved the most would be graphics, surely. But it's the computational power behind the calculations of the car itself that has really accelerated. Also the mechanical side of the sim itself, the hardware, has improved leaps and bounds from it starting as the first sim I ever did, it's laughable now, but it's all we had. The first sim we ever had was just some kind of metal structure with like a racing shell of a seat inside it with a Logitech steering wheel. It was basically like
what a lot of people have at home now,
but
right?
A poor version of what you'd have at home now. That's how it all began. And that was Sim 2, they called it at the time. There was one even previous. I think it was just literally a computer on a desk with a steering wheel maybe, or even a control pad as the very first one. I didn't drive that, but I drove from Sim 2 upwards, and now they're on iteration 6. And these things obviously take a long time to engineer, come up with the ideas, and to then build. So yeah, iteration 6 of that first sim that I ever ran in Brackley, and this was around the Brawn time. So it just goes to show how long that progress has been. And so yeah, the mechanical side of it now is, you got full motion sims in all axes, and in the early days, like I say, it was just a static sim, barely any feedback coming through the steering. A lot of it was fudged calculations as well from the model itself. Like the tyre model, for example, is probably the most important thing in the sim to master or to get anywhere close. So I mean, trying to just even, I don't know how it's worked out. Imagine what a tyre does on a racetrack as it pushes and scrubs itself along the tarmac. Turning that into ones and zeros is something my brain can't go to. But some people out there see that in ones and zeros and can work it all out and then create a model around it. That's genius stuff, really is. So yeah, so I've seen all that, those sides of things improve leaps and bounds.
And just how good is the correlation between that and what we're seeing here at the racetrack? So we're speaking at Silverstone, right? Friday night is going to be a busy night on the sim, just 6 miles away in Brackley, isn't it? How much does the work that's happening overnight on Friday really help what's going on the racetrack?
I think over Friday night, it just cements what the team are already thinking of trying or doing with the car. So they're obviously pulling lots of information from the car real time, and then that's analysed, studied in between sessions, even in between each run. And that's all being fed back to the factory, of course, as well. Teams of engineers are working on back at base remotely, no matter where we are in the world. Could be Australia. They're still up at the same times as we are at the track. And they're constantly analysing what fine tweaks they can do with these cars. They're incredibly hard to set up these days with the ground effects and how fragile the tyres are, how to get best out of them. And so they're already along a few pathways of where to improve things, but they use the sim to just, like I say, cement one idea, one philosophy where you're going to take that setup. Sometimes, and quite often, the baseline, as we call it, that line in the sand of where you start, where the pre-event sims have suggested you should run the car, quite often that is the best way to be running things. But as subtleties change throughout the event, it could be the fact that the car bottoms out ever so slightly more. They might have tinkered with the curbs on the track. They might have resurfaced some area of the track that's causing a bit more bottoming maybe. Temperatures can even change the way that the car's suspension works and the way that the tyres as well, that how much squash they have. And that can throw the these incredibly sensitive cars out of kilter with the ride heights. As we know, it's all about getting the ride height as close to the floor as possible, as close to the ground as possible. So if that shifts slightly, then your initial calculations before you go to the event have to then be tweaked. And that's when you rely more on the sim and the driver's feel in the sim than occasions where that doesn't need touching.
Right, so that's improving the car with the sim. How much does the sim improve the driver?
That's up for debate. It really is up for debate. I'm of the opinion, if you had never driven the car, like my example in Austin, I think it can give you quite a lot of a feel for what the car can do. And everyone's sim's different. I think Mercedes probably got one of the best sims out there. You should imagine, I'd like to hope that we've got one of the best sims because I helped develop it. But I think some sims might give a driver less of a feel. But I think I do think when you're at the level you are as an F1 driver, it's going to give you less than what you can give the team by driving their sim. So most of it is a selfless task from a driver's point of view because you are just validating what they think they're going to see in the data. So it's less about the driver. It's one of the rarities in Formula One where, you know, a big part of why we have so many fans turn up to F1 events is to see the drivers, hear from the drivers, and it's all about the driver. But in the world of the simulator, it's all about the engineering. And the driver is just a human element that can help give them more data.
Can I put this to you then? Gerhard Berger said to me 6 months ago that he thinks Max Verstappen is a better racing driver than Ayrton Senna. And let's remember that Gerhard was Ayrton's teammate at McLaren. I said why, and he said it's because of all the sim driving that Max does, which wasn't available to Ayrton. So if the natural talent was the same, Max is now at another level to Senna because of all the sim driving. Or if you do 1,000 starts in a year, that is all practice. That is still using your peripheral vision, and it's all about car placement. Do you agree with Berger?
Well, I think I'd like to agree with the fact that every athlete over time should improve over previous generations. Otherwise, what are we doing? You know, you're always striving to improve. So you look at any athlete over time, records are still being broken today. And it's not because the human body's evolved. It's because the science behind it has evolved. And the athlete is very much part of that drive to improve. So I think that element is probably correct. Yes, I think, you know, I'm lucky I'm a generation like you where we saw Senna drive and race. And although I didn't understand all the nuances behind it back then because I was young and was barely racing myself, but I'd like to think that Max would be, and many of the drivers today would be operating at a higher level than Senna would have been because just what goes into it, that strive to performance is at a higher level today from all around. So the demands on a driver today, although the cars arguably are easier to drive, the competition is stronger. It's, you know, it was Senna and Prost out there alone many times by a minute over the competition with almost 100 horsepower more than anyone in their Hondas as it was back then, and they only had each other to race most of the time, particularly in one of the seasons. So, you know, where's the other competition coming from? And that sharpens you as a driver. So I do think that Max, he operates at such a high level. We know that. Does it come from the sim alone? I don't think it comes from the Red Bull simulator. I think it comes from more his home sim. I think that's what Berger's referring to, particularly the iRacing that he does. And you think he's in competition constantly in that regard. I've played it. I know that sim well. And I think there are elements that you can take to the racetrack from that in terms of the racecraft and ideas that you might have on different circuits from playing the sims that you can try in real life. It might not work, but if it does, then great. And yeah, I think many drivers are out there doing this. So Bortoletto's one of the other drivers that's constantly on there, and a couple of the F2 drivers as well. And you see this young generation, they're all at it, they're all doing the same kind of thing. So I think it probably does bring new ideas to the table that you might not have necessarily found without it. So it's a really interesting time that now the sims are getting to such a level that it can give you some ideas, definitely. But I wouldn't pin it all on that. I think if Max had never sat in a sim in his life, he still would have been incredible.
Do you know, I was thinking about the Sims during the drivers' press conference on the Thursday of Silverstone, because Lando Norris said that he feels a racing car more through his hands than any other part of his body. And again, I was then thinking, is that because of sim racing? Without sim racing, would it be the more traditional touch points like your bum or your feet, maybe your ears? But he said he gets it all from through his hands, which is why having a strong the front end that he needs, why he's so sensitive to the front end.
Yeah, perhaps he feels, different drivers have different. Obviously, everyone's got different senses that you rely on inside the car, but different drivers might rely more on one sensor than the other sensor than somebody else. So, like I mentioned, like the inner ear, if you ever drive a racing car and you've got some kind of ear infection or even just a cold and you've got blocked ears, you do lose your balance. And driving a car is much more about balance than it is hand-to-eye coordination. Many people make that mistake when they think about what makes a good racing driver. It's actually more about balance. So in that regard, more in line with, say, skiing, snowboarding, surfing, I think most drivers and vice versa would make good athletes in either discipline if given enough training. So Lando's saying, yeah, he feels it more through the steering wheel. That's an interesting one. And maybe that's why with this latest development of suspension on the McLaren he's trying to find something that he feels the front end more through the steering wheel. He says he's missed that this year. And then sitting in a static sim where you're robbed of all those other senses, so you can forget the inner ear, that's gone because you're not moving at all. You can forget your inner gyro, what you're feeling, so the seat of the pants driving, that's gone as well. So it's the only thing you have are your vision as a cue and what's coming through your hands. And maybe that's just become heightened over time from doing just this one avenue of driving. But I'd like to see how he'd get on if you robbed him of his other cues that he's got when he's out in the real car, because the one thing that wins over any other cueing force when you're in the car is the G-force. So going back to the Sims, if you have so it's the rotation of the platform. So obviously when a car does a lap, it does a 360 every lap. It ends up back on the same part of the track, facing the same way, apart from Suzuka, of course, which is a figure of 8. So it does a 360 every lap. So you have to feel a lot of yaw in the car. But if you only have yaw, like you do in a simulator, you can't really engage G-force in a sim. It's the one cue that's missing. So everything else, particularly the yaw, becomes heightened because you transfix on it. And if you were to inject the exact one-to-one yaw from what the car does on the real track, it doesn't feel right, because you feel it too much. You feel like you're spinning, whereas actually in real life, the G-force dilutes the feeling of yaw. So that's one element that is critical to get right in motion, in the world of motion cueing, that many people make the mistake.
That's fascinating, and I guess everything you've just described is one of the reasons why some people feel sick on a sim. Is that right?
So that's the relationship between what you're seeing and a learned knowledge of what that should feel like, and being robbed of that G-force, that other cueing, that mechanism, what your inner ear is supposed to be feeling. That's the bit that can make you feel sick. And there's an element of how you can train your way out of that, but particularly older drivers will struggle more because having never been in the simulator or even a home sim. So
Lewis Hamilton says he feels sick in a sim, and Kimi Räikkönen, well,
I think some drivers might use it as an excuse why they don't want to do any sim. Michael Schumacher, though, famously, he if there's ever a person on the planet would want to find an edge to performance by anywhere possible, it would be Michael Schumacher, and he couldn't do more than a handful of laps in a sim because he would start feeling sick. So a driver, I still think that a driver that didn't grow up racing on even just a control pad like I did, control pad and a TV on a console, even that taught your brain to try to feel something you were seeing and feeling through the control pad. I think it helped to wire my brain up in a way that I was lucky. I never felt sick from any motion kit, unless it's very badly done. Then it will be. If it's a proper roller coaster ride, then it won't feel. Then it's going to make you feel sick.
This episode is sponsored by Vanta. You know how in Formula One, trust between the driver and the team is everything. Well, it's not so different in business. You need to prove your company is trustworthy to close deals and move forward. But it can also be costly, time-intensive, and complex. And that's where Vanta can help. They help companies show they take security and compliance seriously without drowning in spreadsheets or dragging audits out for months. So whether you're a startup working through your first SOC 2 or ISO 27001, or a bigger team managing vendor risk, Vanta makes the process quicker, simpler, and scalable. You can automate compliance across more than 35 frameworks, fly through security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and let it all run quietly in the background while you focus on growing your business. Visit vanta.com/grid to sign up for a free demo today. That's vanta.com/grid. Well, and let's talk about your F1 career now, your time in F1. You did 24 races. You didn't get the opportunities that your talent deserved. So how do you look back on your time in F1? Is it a little bit of frustration, or do you look back fondly and just go, it was an amazing ride?
It really depends, if I'm feeling more ambitious on that particular day or more jealous maybe of others that have achieved more, then I'll wish that I had achieved more. But if I look back to my background, my family, we grew up with a family. We didn't have much money, so it was a sport we could just about afford, with some help from work strives here and there as well along the way. And when I think back to that, it's remarkable that I actually ended up on the grid. So that makes me proud, and I think I definitely look back now mostly and I think, wow, I was one of the lucky ones that made it onto the grid. I lived through a boyhood dream. I was obsessed about it as a kid, and it's all I wanted to do. It's all I could do. It was the only thing I was good at. So to actually end up in the pinnacle of the sport on the grid through talent, not through money, that makes me proud. And I'm also proud of all the testing miles I did, and still proud of the job I do today in the simulator. But I always felt like now I've retired and I can look back at the whole picture of my driving time. Probably deserved more. Everyone always wants a better car, but it doesn't always materialize. But I was probably, being super self-critical, I was probably always more of a, because of the way my brain works, more analytical. I was probably a better test driver than I was racing driver, and that was the thing. I got stuck in that rut too much.
That's because you started as a test driver. That was going to be my next question. You joined British American Racing 2001 as a test driver. Was there the promise, the lure of a race drive?
It always was, yeah, and it eventually materialized into Super Aguri. But so I'm a loyal person, and I was keen to stay with the team and try to impress them as much as I could. And I thought impressing them by being as good a test driver as I possibly could be, that would see me through to land a race seat one day, which ultimately it did with Super Aguri, but it was very much an afterthought, I think, than being put into one of the main race seats at BAR or Honda as it turned into. So there were definitely times where it's frustrating, where I felt like the speed was there. Surely you can see what I'm doing behind the wheel and you know, give me a chance. But when that chance came, yeah, obviously it was with Super Aguri, and I'd been out racing for so long by that point. If there was one mistake I made, and it'd be my advice to my younger self and to anyone else that's watching this that is competing at top level junior categories that are right on the brink of maybe a reserve driver yourself, and you're watching this, you have to race. You have anything, anywhere, race something. So it goes back to what we're saying with Max Verstappen and all the online racing stuff you're doing. It's no good if you're not racing something somewhere in reality as well. And that was my downfall. When I got my chance, I felt underprepared with just my race sharpness had left me for probably the first half of the season in Super Aguri, my first year in 2007.
And let's talk about that a little bit more then. You race through karting. You're hugely successful at karting. You win the McLaren Autosport Young Driver of the Year award. You are the next big thing. You then do 2 seasons of car racing. You win the Formula Ford Festival. You then go into Formula 3. You outperform your teammate in the second half of the year. It's all looking great. You then commit to being a test driver. Now, is that what you mean? You wished you hadn't done the test driving bit at that stage and you'd carried on racing? Is that what you mean?
Just done both. I wish I had done both. I wish I had tested. Obviously, testing was the main thing. And I dabbled with, I think I did Le Mans in 2003 in the Ferrari. Maybe it's 2002.
With Jos Verstappen?
No, that was later on. That was with the Lola. Okay. That was the Lola LMP1 car with Jos. But yeah, I did the Ferrari first, the Ferrari 550 Maranello, and that was with ProDrive. And it was the ProDrive David Richards connection with BAR Honda that opened that door. And I had fun, but I just did a few races. I didn't do a whole championship. And then I went many years after that time, all the way up until, I believe, I didn't do any other racing up until my 2007 debut with Super Aguri. And maybe the 2 laps I did in 2005 in the BAR Honda. Yeah. That was 2 laps of racing. Racing. Yeah. I was just race rusty. I was completely race rusty. So that would be my advice to my younger self. Just, why didn't you carry on racing something somewhere?
But I think in
conjunction with the testing.
And I think you're being overly harsh on yourself, because you preceded all of the driver academies, the team academies like that we see now. And, you know, like, was there ever a discussion between you and BAR about them funding a season of what would have been Formula 3000 at the time?
No, not at all. Not at all. The money wasn't there to do it. Well, the money probably was there. We had more money than ever back then, didn't we? With a sponsorship, and the world in general was a healthier place in terms of economics. But I think, yeah, it was a very rough around the edges approach to a young driver program. I was one of the first people at BAR Honda to be taken in and as a future prospect, I think. But when you look at what the academies are, how they're structured today, you can't compare it. And again, it's another thing that, of course, it's improved. Of course, that aspect in Formula One is unrecognisable today compared to how it used to be.
Well, let's talk about the testing that you did. Give us an idea of how many miles you would do a year and what kind of testing it was.
So basically, it was all the testing that we can do, or a lot of the testing that we do in the simulator today, was done on the real track. So we had, it sounds crazy to say now, a designated, fully fledged test team at the F1. So you had test team trucks, multiple trucks, just to go testing with. It's unthinkable now in today's world that we live in, where everything's so streamlined. So we had a full test team manager. So you've got race team managers today, people like Ron Meadows at Mercedes, for example, Jonathan Wheatley, who's at Red Bull. And so we had a test team manager and the whole field of test team mechanics We were notching up close to 2,000 members of staff in a Formula One team back then, forgetting the engine side of things, because the teams were massive. And so as one race team was out doing its thing, their test team was leaving Brackley to drive all the way down to Jerez in Spain to start a 3 or 4 day test. And when the race drivers had finished on the Sunday, so Jacques Villeneuve and Olivier Panis, who were the drivers at the time, they would then have 1 or 2 days at home, Monday, Tuesday, and then they would join you on the Wednesday and carry on maybe the last day or two final days of testing while you were testing on the Monday, Tuesday, and then they'd join on the Wednesday, Thursday, and you had 3 cars. You'd go to you'd have 3 chassis. And Olivier would have his one, Jacques would be in his, I'd be in the other one, or whichever test driver it was on that day. So you had a complete reference all the time of where the benchmark was. And yes, of course, you'd be testing different things and the normal stuff that you see today. But it was...
How many days a year were you doing in the car?
Days a year... I forget how many days a year it would be, but in terms of kilometres, it was notching up over 15,000 kilometres. So over close to 10,000 miles of testing miles a year.
That's huge.
So you were fully integrated into the team, and then you had the Fridays as well that came along.
Well, that
the
was
Friday
I was going to ask you about that. 2004, 2006, all of the teams, I think outside of the top 4 in the Constructors' Championship, could turn up with a 3rd car for Friday practice. And
a full 3rd car as well. It didn't have to be segmented in the garage and just a bit of a bitzer. It was just sitting there, a T car, the 3rd car, in the middle of the garage, and it was your car. It even had my own liveries and stuff with BAR doing their own thing and with sponsorship. So... And again, you were out there on the same track as 2 other race drivers, and they were brilliant days. And I know we can't go back there because of the finances, but for a young driver, it was gold dust. It really was, to have that time. So you could, and many of my better days were actually on those Fridays where you'd raise a few eyebrows, even within your own team, because a bit like testing today, the limited testing we have, it's hard to analyse, to take an assessment of really how are they doing compared to the race driver. How hard are the race drivers really pushing, and they've just finished a race weekend, are they really pushing that hard? But on a race weekend, you were there, living and breathing it with them, either side of you in the garage. And I think some of my better days it stemmed from those moments on the Friday, because you're under so much pressure as well. In general testing, there's less time pressure. You had time to sort the car. The cars were less reliable back then, so even getting over 90 laps in a day was, wow, you've done 90 laps. That was like the magic threshold that, wow, you went over 100 laps. You must be absolutely knackered. Now they do 140 laps easy in a 1 day of testing per driver. So yeah, it was all we could do to utilise what we had back then.
I used to love those Fridays because it got really competitive between the Friday drivers. I'm thinking of you and Alex Wirtz and Alan McNish.
Robert Kubica, Sebastian Vettel, before he was quickly snapped up by BMW and then onto Red Bull.
But everyone looking to see who was the quickest of the Friday drivers. Yeah. Did the team give you an opportunity? Did you take the fuel out and put some new tyres on and see what you could do?
Very rarely you'd go all out and pump all the fuel out of new tyres. I think there's only one time that I can remember in China where it was a big event for that particular market, for the sponsorship we had, and they wanted to end on top, and they did drain most of the fuel out, but most of the time it was good sort of 30 to 50 kilos in the car, and the lap times were still there. The one thing you did have at your disposal compared to the race drivers who you didn't have to worry about your engine mileage. So you could run a few more RPM, about 400 RPM from memory, what it was, and that probably gave you 2-3 tenths of a second, or maybe sniff more. But it was really a time where the thing I remember from that was the pressure was on. And people were watching to see how, like any FP1 session we have today, let's see how the rookies do. Look at Dunn in Austria, Alex Dunn, how he got on. And suddenly you go, well, I don't really care how much fuel he was on or wasn't on compared to Piastri. You know when someone's doing a good job and using all the racetrack and not afraid to push the car. And we see it. We've got such a trained eye. We see it. And I think that was part of the fun, part of the magic back then as well. And I really miss those days. I wish we had more of that today. Because obviously when Alex Dunn jumps in the car, well, where's Lando? You've only got one point of reference. And I know Piastri is obviously a really good point of reference, but if you had both of them out there pushing each other on and developing the car, and you were out there as well between them, how does that pressure mount on your shoulders then? And you can read more into it. So I do miss those days, but I know we're never going back there.
I can see your face lighting up just at the memory of those Friday tests. Can we talk about tyre testing as well? That looked like a lot of fun. It was a Tyre War. It was a Bridgestone Michelin Tyre War. Just tell us a little bit about that side of things and how good the tyres were back then. The groove tyres as well.
Ted Kravitz's favourite topic, talking about tyres. One of the most boring parts in any road car. You never mention, I like your tyres on that car. Wow, what tyres have you got? But in Formula One or any sport where it relies on tyres, is pretty much your everything. It's the only point of contact from the car on the ground most of the time. And so much of your performance comes from them. And in those days, driving on, I was lucky I drove for the Bridgestone and Michelin's in Formula One. And so got to see how two different top flight manufacturers in the sport, how they operated, was such an education. And so many brains from that industry back then infiltrated their way into Formula One. So Loic Serra, for example, used to be a Michelin. He was a Michelin tyre engineer.
Pierre Vacher.
And Pascal Vasselon. He was another Michelin tyre engineer. So, clever people. And the teams, they hang on their every word when it comes to the debriefs and how to get the best out of the tyres. So a lot of that learning was done in the real world, real track testing back in those days. And it was, honestly, again, another time. I'm not just seeing this through rose-tinted glasses. You speak to any tyre engineer in the paddock today and they'll go, yeah, those times were crazy. Yeah, Michelin joined, and by all accounts, they had an open checkbook. You win the world championship. Open checkbook. They had private jets flying new sets of compounds out to a test where Renault were or BAR.
That's an interesting point. Would they design compounds and tyres for a specific racetrack?
Specific racetrack? They were designing compounds and tyres for specific teams. So
I mean, that's so
it was amazing.
Yeah,
so you would go. So most of your, and I love it, even speaking to younger F1 engineers today who are off the scale bright, to speak to them about what I'm about to say, it blows their minds. So you'd go to the track and you'd have a tyre debrief sheet given to you after a couple of laps. And so you'd get a datum point. So this is your baseline tyre. You go out, you get in the groove, you set some lap times, you maybe throw another brand new set on you, and you go and do the same thing again, just to see if your references tie up. And then you take that point of reference in your head, where the grip was, how the car balance was, and then we'll throw the first option at you. So today we're going to focus on short runs. That's how it usually works. You have 5 time laps and 50 kilos runs, or maybe 30 kilos. And then you do your couple of laps and you'd feed it straight away. As soon as you went out, even sometimes the first corner, you'd go, oh wow, this has got a different feel coming through the steering, or it's a bit more squash to the tyre on the rear. It's like there's more movement in the shoulder of the tyre somehow. It's a bit softer maybe. And you do the first lap and you'd look down at the lap time and you go, wow, half a second quicker on the first lap. Unbelievable. I wonder how it's going to translate over lap 3 or 4 into 5. Oh, look, the deg's much higher. I'm now 5/10 slower than I was on lap 5 of my baseline run. You'd come in and they'd give you another sheet and you'd have the baseline still, then there were zeros on it. And you'd have to think, like, turning point, braking, is that a +1 or a -1 in terms of understeer or oversteer? And you go, yeah, actually, it did have a bit more turn, a bit more bite, and so it's less understeer. I'll give that a +1 for that one, or maybe a +2. It's really good there. And you go through breaking the corner down like that. And then you go through multiple sets. Probably 25 sets of tyres would come your way in a day. And you'd actually be off if you ever got, how dare you put an old set of tyres on my car? You like take the tyre blankets and we go, guys, what's going on? Why have you given me this old set? What's going on? It's really annoying. It's like we were so spoiled. And you'd go away after all this and you'd go, yeah, thanks for all the debriefs and thanks for all the, wow, this sets that we found today, tomorrow we're going to do the long runs. And they'd whittle down a few, like 5 or 6 of the good ones that you picked from that day. And you'd basically, by the end of it, you'd tune your tyres around your car. So you barely touched your car design and setup of the car. You do it all through the tyres. So if you say, like, I've got too much mid-corner understeer, give me a tyre which is going to give me just a bit more stability on the front end, so I don't want it to fall over so much. We'll work on that. They come back literally 2 weeks later and they had that. And the car felt like what you wanted.
It seems to me that the focus was on the tyres. You know, some designer coming up to you going, Anthony, we've got a new front wing end plate. Yeah, whatever. What's the tyres doing?
Obviously, downforce was always your friend as well. But it was a lot more. It was dare I say, and it probably upset some of the older school engineers, a more of a scattergun approach to what you do today. Obviously, the cost cap has really laser focused your upgrades and like where you need it, and we've got so much more R&D today as well, and so much more data being pulled from the car that it's hard not to bring more performance. But you should be bringing, with all the tools you have at your disposal in an F1 team today, you should be bringing more performance when you bring an upgrade. It's a special occasion today, but back then was just like, yeah, we've made a new front wing, let's see how it goes. So no, it wasn't like that. And quite often it would be worse. You go, no, this is awful, take that off. Okay, right, back to the drawing board on that one then. It was a lot more raw back then. More fun in many ways, not way less scientific, but it was, in that area, we just had less, there was just less data being pulled from the car.
And just final one on the tyres. So I loved your description that you gave us. So that's what's going on at BAR. And at Williams, who are also using Michelin's, they'd be having tyres specific to their car as well.
We would share compounds and construction from front to rear. We knew that every other team had these tyres available to them, but we didn't know which direction they were taking their tyres. I remember there was a sticking point at one point where I was pushing to have one set of intermediate tyres, because we tested in the rain as well. They'd water the circuits, and they had water bowsers that would, even in bright sunshine, would be in the middle of Spain, middle of summer, and they'd be wetting the circuit lap after lap with these water bowsers, and you'd be doing wet weather tyre testing. Money no object, honestly, money no object. And I was pushing to have this one set of intermediate tyres. I can't remember now exactly what element it was of them that I preferred. And we didn't get our way within our team. We didn't get the tyre we wanted for the next race coming up. And I think Renault might have had that tyre. And I remember being really annoyed about that, because Bridgestone had bought an upgrade for their wet weather or intermediate tyre, and they kicked everyone's butts back then. So I remember thinking, if only we had our tyre that I wanted from that test, we would have had a much better day today for the race drivers. But it's nothing to do with me. I wasn't the one racing, but that's how integrated I was, and how much I felt, how much I really wanted to, how much I wanted to be a good test driver. I was feeling their pain by the work that I was doing behind the wheel and the testing.
Want to get closer to Formula One than ever before? F1 Experiences has you covered. F1 Experiences offers official ticket packages at every race on the calendar, giving you an unforgettable weekend that goes far beyond just watching from the stands. We're talking the best grandstand views, world-class hospitality, exclusive access pit lane walks, paddock tours, and even guest appearances from F1 insiders. There really is no better way for you to experience the ultimate race weekend. Take in the electric atmosphere of Zandvoort, see the lights of Las Vegas as the drivers race down the world-famous strip, or be there to witness the season finale in Abu Dhabi. F1 Experiences, the closest you can get to Formula One. Visit f1experiences.com/beyondthegrid to book your official ticket package today.
Well, that's Anthony, the test driver. Let's talk about the race driver now. And the first opportunity came in 2002 with Minardi. You replaced Alex Young for a couple of races in the middle of the year in Hungary and Germany. How did that opportunity come about?
Hungary and Spa.
Hungary and Spa.
Yeah.
Belgium, correct.
Close to Germany. Cologne's not too far away.
How did that opportunity come about?
This is it's a bizarre set of circumstances, and just goes to show how fickle this industry is and how lucky you've got to be. So I was happily getting on my test in that season of 2002, so still quite fresh out of Formula 3. I did one test with BAR in 2001, so my main testing started in 2002. And so, yeah, by the time you get to the Hungarian Grand Prix mid-season, I had the opportunity to race with Minardi, and they were a team that were at the back of the grid. As we now know, it's the Racing Bulls. That's their journey of evolution. But they were very much a team that it was very, very hard to ever have a hope of scoring points in. But it was a great place to learn out the spotlight, I think, for young drivers. And Mark Webber was in his first season with the team, and he was becoming more at home in the team, in that car. It was a tricky car to drive, but I had the chance with my management to dive in and do this one race. We paid for it, or my manager paid for it. And it was £250,000 from memory for either each race or both races combined. I think it might have been each race. It probably was. And so we had this opportunity, and you go, well, you grab it with both hands. But the opportunity arose because it was due to be Justin Wilson, who I'd raced with a long time. My generation, with Dan Weldon and Jenson Button, we grew up together on the kart track, so I knew Justin really well, and I'd heard of him having this opportunity with the team beforehand. But as it turned out, being as tall as he was, he couldn't fit the car. He went to go and do the seat fit and couldn't squeeze himself into the car legally. And as I always joke, that then the team, in a state of panic, got the smallest driver that they possibly could find to fit their car and gave me a phone call. But and I did joke about it with Justin at the time, and God rest his soul. He's one of my friends from those days who we lost along the way, but we had a good laugh that day because we both decided that's how it must have came about.
What's the thought process? You know you're going to be at the back of the grid. So what are you expecting to learn? I'm assuming the car is a lot worse than the BAR you've been testing, right? So what were you expecting to learn?
That, again, a good question, because I don't think I actually asked myself that at the time. You're just so blinkered to get to Formula One, race seat, any way you can. Wow, this is your moment. Look at Michael Schumacher in the Jordan. There's never maybe the right time, never a good time, but if you get that time, you grab it with both hands. And so ideally, you wouldn't throw yourself in halfway through the season. But I was probably still a bit too young and naive, and probably had underestimated just how brutal, how competitive Formula One is from a driving point of view, and how much detail goes into it, how at home you need to feel in the car and within the team. And you just don't do that really, especially back then without any simulation tools at your disposal. I couldn't imagine what it was going to feel like. Different tyre as well. So you've gone from the Bridgestones testing with the BAR, and then the Michelin's on the Minardi platform. And it's a car that philosophy it wasn't designed around. Even the power steering system wasn't designed around the Michelin's. It was designed around the Bridgestone. It was an old Arrows F1 system. So all these things now, I look back at it with my experienced brain and I go, yeah, what were you doing? What were you taking from it? What were you learning from it? What did you expect?
But given everything, you actually stacked up very well against Mark Webber.
Yeah, I was looking back at it now, I was, I think, 4.5 tenths away in qualifying in a car I'd never driven before, a track I'd never driven before, on tyres I'd never driven before, and an engine I'd never driven before.
And so you actually did a great job.
I was actually really pleased with that. And another thing that, with my experience I have today, and when they said to me, we've got a fuel pickup problem in the car, and we're going to have to put an extra 10 kilos of fuel in it for qualifying because we've got this fuel pickup problem. It'll be okay. They kind of fobbed me off. And I remember thinking, all right, yeah, okay, extra 10, yeah, so we're not going to have a fuel problem? No, the fuel pickup won't be a problem if we put a bit more fuel in it. Whereas today I'd look around and go, you've just taken 4 tenths away from me. You've done that. I might as well not go out there. And so that's how it unfolded. But, it's a case of, beggars can't be choosers, and you just get out there and you drive your heart out. And that's what I did. So I'm pleased with the qualifying lap I did, but I knew from the first time I got to a loaded corner, like turn 4 and 5, and the steering basically is locked out. It was saturating because, again, it wasn't designed around a Michelin, which is a wider front tyre. So it had more grip than the system was designed for. So it was saturating what the system could deliver in terms of assistance. And I could drive, like I said, up to 100 plus laps in testing in the BAR. It was never a problem. The steering was super light with its power steering it had back then. And this thing was just locking out. And I couldn't turn the steering when it got to this phase where it would just, if you carried too much speed on 2 newer tyres and you get into a corner like turn 5 and you turn in, and then at some point the load would go up too much and it would just plateau. The assistance would plateau. So now you're forcing the hydraulic fluid through the system, which is hard enough, and on top of this super grippy wide front tyres, and I ran out of arm strength. I just couldn't. I knew I was in trouble basically. I didn't have time to train for it. I wasn't ready, and physically found it way too hard.
In terms of percentage, how much easier was the BAR in terms of steering input?
Percentage, 50%. Yeah, it was 50% easier. Yeah, and still is today. It was a car that was, I would be scared of today to get back in and do a couple of laps because it was awful. It was just not the car itself. It was fine to drive. It didn't quite have the same grip and the same balance, but I could tell it wasn't far away from where the BAR was, and it wasn't in performance. You're probably talking 5-6 tenths a lap. It wasn't a massive difference in lap time, but it was just that one element of it which completely ruined the experience for me.
Let's fast forward almost 12 months to the Malaysian Grand Prix in 2005. You touched on it a little bit earlier. Takuma Sato is ill. You are drafted in to be Jenson Button's teammate. How much notice did you get?
So yeah, the Malaysian 2005 Grand Prix. I had flown out typically late because I'd been probably testing the week before, and as a reserve driver, you kind of go into the weekend knowing it could be you, but it probably won't be you. So you can wear the shirt, you can swan around and have a few coffees and hang around with the management and try and convince them that you should be the one driving the car in the race. But yeah, most of the time you know you're destined just for a week or a couple of days of just being there just in case. So I would typically get out there on the Wednesday night, which is what I did. And so you're there on the Thursday, the media day, and you're jet lagged to hell. That race, 8 hours time difference. It's hot, it's humid. Your body's not prepared for it at all. So you're going through the motions of just trying to fight the jet lag. And then Friday was more of the same. But I had heard of Taku not feeling too well.
On the Thursday, or are we now Friday morning?
Was this Friday morning? Yes. So Thursday he wasn't feeling great. No, it was. You know where it was? It was Saturday morning when I got the phone call. He had done FP1 and FP2. In
fact, now
he had done FP1 and FP2. So yeah, I got out there on the Thursday, landed on the Thursday. So Friday I was feeling awful, and I heard that he wasn't feeling very well, but I thought it'll be okay. Saturday morning, I get a phone call from Ron Meadows, and you awake? Yeah, mate. Yeah, I've just woken up. I've literally just woken up. Yeah. You're driving this weekend. You're going to be in the... Taku's not feeling very well. He's out. It's done. So we've had to sign him off, and you're stepping up. You're in the car. Saturday morning. So it's like, whoa, straight away your heart starts going. But this time I was excited because it was a car I knew. And by this point, 2005, I'd done my Friday running on the 2004 sessions, and I really felt like, yeah, I know this car. I've got my own seat. I know where I need all the controls. I don't know the circuit, but I know the car, and that was it was a good moment because I thought, well, I'm really up against it because I've missed out on an FP1, FP2. I'm being thrown in for FP3, and I had to use Taku's tyres as well for the first session. So I couldn't. You had to use his engine. I almost said power unit, but they were engines back then. So I had to take his engine. You had to take their equipment, including their tyres. So the last thing he'd done in the car, I think he'd had a spin and flat spotted all 4 tyres. And I had Jock Clear as my engineer, who's now at Ferrari, looking after their young driver academy, amongst other things. And so super experienced engineer, world championship winning engineer with Jacques Villeneuve, of course, back in the day at Williams. So, and he had engineered me in testing as well many times, and had a good relationship with him. And I remember, going through all the talks beforehand with Jock about the fact I'd be taking on Taku's tyres and FP3, and then we'll give you a new set, one run on new tyres before end of session, and then after that you're into qualifying. And back then it was a 1-lap shootout. Do you remember that system? Yes. A 1-lap shootout on the Saturday, and then another one on the Sunday.
I can't imagine how hard that was for you.
So when I jumped in, it was honestly, it was so cool because I've always been a driver that could adapt pretty quickly. It was one of the skill sets I had. I could always get up to speed pretty quick. So I was learning the track and feeling my way. No, sorry, I knew the track a bit from my 2004 Friday running. So I had done some laps in an F1 car. So at least I had that. And so I could hit the ground running, and I was getting used to just everything really, and just trying to get into the groove. But everyone else, you feel like you're so behind the curve because everybody else, they're in FP3, they've done the first 2 sessions, and they're fully in the groove, and you see that, you feel it, and excuse me, sorry, after you, and you're trying to work your way into their environment. And I've never been that kind of pushy, bolshy character that's cocky. And
was Jensen helpful? Your old mucker from karting?
a little bit. But he's on the other side of the garage. He was doing his own thing, and focusing further up the grid. And he was, the way it worked, if you were a rookie driver coming in or a replacement driver like I was, you had to go first in qualifying. So when the track was green.
Dirtiest.
Dirty. So after FP3, then got the support races, whatever they had, Mazda Cup or whatever they had going around that track. And so they'd take all the tyres, like they had dirt all over the track, and the recovery vehicles had been out. And I was thinking, this would be interesting. I knew the format, but I wonder, is it going to be an advantage or will it be a disadvantage? It's probably a disadvantage. And sure enough, it was. The car on the first lap the only lap, it had no grip. But I did my best. And I think I was, close to the back of the grid. Not quite at the back that day, but they took the aggregate from the first two. I can't honestly remember the lap times.
Well, you qualified 15th.
Overall, or on the first day. Yeah, overall. I think overall 15th, yeah. So that's not too bad when you think I was probably lower on the first run, because every lap just starts getting quicker and quicker. But the good one was Sunday morning, where without any practice at all, you were straight into qualifying. Again, a one-lap shootout. That was demanding. I remember speaking to Fernando actually on the Sunday, and he said, yeah, this format, you'll see, Sunday, it's very tough. And when he said that, I thought, okay, let's see. Threw myself in Sunday, and actually that was a much better lap. I think I was only 0.4 away from Jensen on the Sunday. Again, going before him, but the track was already much more rubbered in. So I was pretty pleased with that lap, because he was an ace around that circuit. As we know, Jensen had a good style round for that one. So I remember thinking, that's actually not bad. And I was really looking forward to the race. And you probably got another question then.
No, you haven't. No, it was just 2 laps. 2 laps and it went bang.
Yeah, it was gutting. And so I started the race thinking, this would be great. And I was in the mix. There was Villeneuve in the Sauber and others around me. And I was really in it thinking, I'm just going to work my way into this. And I reckon I'm only going to be getting quicker as the race goes on. And didn't lose any positions at the start. And so I kept my 15th, but I was right with them. And then the car on the end of, around lap 2, started to feel really slippery. It's like, whoa, the tyre deg is massive on this track. It feels terrible. And a few lockups and oversteered, but I could see others struggling around me as well. I was thinking, what is going on here? Maybe we got dirt in our tyres. And then I saw him at the side of the track, Jensen, blown up, flames, and I thought, oh no. And I got the radio, Jensen's out, engine failure. Oh, that explains the oil. That's why the car was slipping around. Yeah, I get it. So I do half a lap more, thinking, I can't believe he's out of the race. How unlucky. It's only just started. And the car's still sliding around just as much as it was before. And I'm thinking, when's this oil going to clear up? And then just suddenly, bang, the engine gone and mine. And I can't believe it. The engine's gone. And of course, the oil was spewing out my car as well as the oil he was leaving on the track. Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous scenes. And to the point where some members of the team, I think Jeff Willis, who was watching on, they kept showing a replay of Jensen's failure and the flames. And apparently he got annoyed at the TV. He's like, all right, stop showing the replay of we know he's blown up. Someone said, no, that's Ant. That's his engine. Awful. I mean, I can laugh about it now, but it was...
Was it a low moment for you? Because this was the big opportunity, wasn't it?
It was. I wanted to put right what had happened with Minardi with the 2 DNFs there, and this was my next chance to show, after strong Friday running, and I had more a better reputation. I wanted to redeem myself. I wanted to show that, I can finish a race. I'm not going to run out of arm strength this time or anything otherwise. So, but actually, looking at how the universe works out, some top people from Honda came up to me that day who were quite pleased to see me in the car, quite pleased to give me the chance, and knowing the Japanese culture and how they work and how loss of face is a bad thing. It's not to be taken lightly in Japanese culture. And I think they felt so sad about what had happened, and so they felt so sorry for me particularly that I won't mention who it was, but they looked at me and said, obviously very sorry about today. We really apologise. It was our fault. We feel bad. Blah blah blah. And at the end of it, he said, "And we will repay you." And I was thinking, money? But I thought, oh, that's really... And when he said that, I thought, wow, they will repay me. How? Are they going to put me in the race seat? Are they going to kick out one of the drivers and put me in the race seat? I took it seriously. Super Aguri.
You think that's where the first seeds of Super Aguri were sown?
Not the first seeds, but for me, yes. Because Takuma, the team was created for him. But me getting a chance, I still believe to this day, it was because of that moment.
This episode is sponsored by Indeed. You know that feeling when you realise you needed to hire someone yesterday, the pressure's on and you need to move fast? That's where Indeed can help. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen on other sites, just use Indeed's sponsored jobs to stand out and hire fast. Your post will move right to the top for the most relevant candidates, so you can connect with the best people for the job from the start. And that kind of visibility should not be underestimated. In fact, Indeed data shows that sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed receive 45% more applications than non-sponsored ones. And what I love about Indeed is how streamlined and efficient it makes the whole hiring process. No more lengthy subscriptions or locked-in contracts. You just pay for results. And when I say it's fast, I mean it. In the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/grid. Just go to Indeed.com/grid right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/grid. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need.
So how would you describe Super Aguri? The opportunity comes in 2007. It's a regular race seat. You're using, I think, year-old BAR chassis, isn't it? So it's the car that Jenson Button won the Hungarian Grand Prix in the previous season. I mean, what is the modern-day equivalent of Super Aguri? Is there even one?
I think the closest you can get today to Super Aguri would be Racing Bulls. That the close connection with the A team. Obviously, a lot more rules in place today. Things like you must build your own. You must be a true manufacturer in building your own equipment, your own chassis, certain elements of the car that you have to own and design from scratch. So that wasn't the case back then. So Honda utilized that system and created this, effectively this B team, which I guess Toro Rosso is the best example of when they were allowed to run pretty much last year's car and current engines. So it was really that car. Nothing had changed on it. So it had gone through a whole season of other teams' evolution that had sent it from being a top-end midfield team to very much a midfield team from the offset.
So you were mid-grid at the start of the season?
Yeah, we were mid-grid. So I'd say when I jumped in and I wasn't at my best, because remember Race Rusty, I'd only done those two and a tiny fraction laps at Malaysia. I was going through that phase. So as I was not at my best, I had the speed, but at not racecraft. So I was able to qualify 11th in Melbourne, the first race with that car. Taku was 10th, and we were super close in lap time. So yeah, he just scraped through to Q3. And I remember I made an awful getaway, it's a terrible start, and another thing that I hadn't done much practice with, and something today you definitely would have nailed it. You would have absolutely honed your skill in that regard, but back then it was forgotten about and it didn't work out well. But as the car was performing at its best, I wasn't at my best, and as I improved and felt more at home in Formula One and felt like I was getting better, the car was it stagnated and zero development. So it was a real lesson for me as well. And something, again, I use today is that if you stay still in this industry, you will get overtaken. You'll be last, and that's effectively what happened to us at the end. We were fighting with Spiker right at the back of the grid in the last couple of races of the year.
What was the goal of the team? What was, obviously you couldn't be faster than the main team, or
no, we could, and we were quite.
There were
often.
no limitations put on you.
No, there were no. Only that if they were behind us, you wouldn't hold them up. Don't fight them too hard. So if they were on a different strategy to you, be mindful of the A team and their goals. And you're there to. They had briefed me that you're there to show us what you can do, but also to, when we need, play the team game if we're on alternate strategies. But I could race them, and I did, and I remember catching and passing Jensen at the American Grand Prix at Indy on a different tyre strategy, and there was just we were racing, definitely, but it's only in the same way that you'd see sister cars not wanting to trip over each other, take each other out, cause any upset internally in the team by ruining someone's strategy, alternate strategy. It's just being respectful, basically, of seeing the bigger picture. So that there was only that papaya rules in place, if we should use that terminology to people who are more familiar with today. There was only that in place, but you could definitely race, yeah.
And it feels like that June of that year was a bit of a purple patch for the team. You've talked about overtaking Jensen at Indy. A week earlier in Montreal, you almost had your day of days, didn't you? Just tell us what your memories are of what was a slightly chaotic race with Robert Kubica's huge accident and things like that. But you came through.
As I was going to say, it would have been born out of somebody else's terrible misfortune. What would have been really my best chance of scoring points in Formula One, and it was only a top 8 that scored points back then as well, so harder to achieve than it is today. But so I'd had 3 11th places in total that season. So even on today's system, I wouldn't have scored any points from that year. But that would have been my best chance. I was on a one-stop strategy, which was, it's commonplace today, but it was with fuel stops. It was a much more ambitious strategy back then. So I was pulling it off. I was making it work, and I had Ralf Schumacher in the Toyota put in pressure, but I was comfortable with that. I had the pace to hold them at bay. And cut a long story short, you had Kubica's crash, safety cars, blah, blah, blah. Schumacher, who was also on a one-stop, Ralf, who was on a one-stop strategy as well, exactly the same as us, he finished, I believe, 5th that day.
And why didn't you? Why didn't it happen? Remind us.
Oh, do I have to? So I'd come out, and I think I'd done my pit stop. No, I was yet to stop. And two drivers had done a stop, and they'd come out the pits in front of me. So we'd just gone under safety car conditions, and so I still had Ralf behind me. So two drivers came out. It was Hamilton and Heidfeld. And after safety car pulled in, we got going in. So I was running in 3rd place, but I was yet to pit. And so they were doing multiple stops. I was on the one stopper. So they pulled away the new tyres, and they started pulling away. And we came up to turn 8, 9 under the bridge. And I was following Heidfeld. He's in the distance, but I was following Heidfeld, same line. And it's the line you'd always take into the corner, and it's bouncing around, and his visibility is quite hard under the shade of the tunnel, and blah, blah, blah. And I remember just on the racing line, and I just saw something in the last minute go under my car, and I locked up instantly. And it just looked like, I couldn't work out what it was, but I saw something flash by in the darkness, the shadow of the tunnel, and I saw something, and it felt something on the front end, and suddenly I locked up, and I went really wide in the chicane, turn 8, and oh no, onto the marbles, and Ralph's now right behind, putting pressure down into the hairpin at turn 10. I thought, okay, right, collect it, brake early into 10, because that was weird what just happened there. to make sure, brake early. Marbles in the tyres. That was odd, what happened with the front just locking out nowhere. Tyres getting old, chill out, brake early, defend your position. Braked early, and it locked up again. More than you'd really expect. I was like, got round the corner, and I was thinking, what's going on? What's locking up? You're trying, like, your brain's going, it's on fast forward. And I was thinking, right, the next corner I'm going down to is really quick. It's the chicane by the Wall of Champions. So it's like, now I'm worried that there's something unsafe with the car. So I just said in my head that really take care. It's going into one of the fastest braking zones on the track. And as I braked, just even the lightest touch, it locked both front wheels. And I knew I'd be heading into the wall that separates the pit wall and racetrack. And that would have been a massive crash. So the last thing I could think is just go into the pit lane. So I sent it into the pit lane, and the team were completely unaware that that's what was going on. I didn't even really have time to be on the radio to say, something feels weird with the car, it keeps locking up, because the chicane and the hairpin are too close in proximity. But I probably, in hindsight, should have said something, but I still don't think they would have. I wouldn't have said, I'm going to come into the pits because something's not wrong with the car. You never want to come in, not when you're running third. So that was the deliberation in my head, and yeah, it was played out like that, and that was that. It had absolutely destroyed the front end of the car, barge board gone, dead animals stuck in the front wing, and broken a whole load of the front wing off. And yeah, so that was that. Sent me back out there, and I can't remember where I finished now. I was behind Rosberg through the end. I knew I was quicker, but I couldn't find a way by.
You so deserved those points.
Thank you, but it's not what defines me anyway, and it wouldn't have done, and it wouldn't have changed any. It wouldn't have changed history. I wouldn't have gone on to land a race seat somewhere else.
Well, and what you do go on to do after Formula One is you have a hugely successful career in sports cars. You become the world champion, of course.
Well, I found a new avenue in sports cars. I'll never forget the first time I stepped foot in a LMP1 car. It was the Peugeot in Paul Ricard, and I fell in love with it. From the moment I drove that car, I just felt, this feels like this whole environment. And the car itself just feels like this is what I want to do.
Why?
Feels right.
Why were you so at home in it?
I think sports cars, particularly back then, sports cars was what's the best way I can describe this without upsetting anybody? Sports cars are less. It's kind of you're out of the limelight, basically. It was a championship, particularly back then, before it became the World Endurance Championship, that I always used to call it the secret category of motor racing.
What do you mean by that?
Because nobody in Formula One really talked about it, knew about it. We all talk about WEC today a lot, the World Endurance Championship, Le Mans. It's on everyone's radar. Young drivers sign up to do it. That wasn't the case back then. You had more mature drivers, should I say, that would think about doing it as an after career almost from what they had done previously. There wasn't a world championship. There wasn't even a proper championship in place, and lacked the structure that it has today, that's for sure, and lacked the competition. But the cars were amazing. Peugeot versus Audi. You only had the two brands when I joined, but it was just like a Formula One car with a roof over your head. They were incredible bits of kit.
Why were you so good at it? Was it your analytical brain? Did it lend itself more to that?
I think it felt more like, well, I don't know. It was a heavier car, something that really felt like, well, it's a ground effects car, which the F1s weren't. It was more of a mechanical car, so it relied more on the tyres, a bit more like a go-kart would. So kind of, honestly, I don't know. I don't know why. I just stepped in the car, quick straight away. Some people say, well, it must have been your weight, but there were light people in there already, teammates that I had, people like Nick Manassian, for example, who were a well-established sports car driver back then. We were pretty much the same weight, and so yeah, probably an element of that, but it wasn't everything. And it just for whatever reason, different drivers will suit a different time in a certain car, a certain era will suit them. Who's to say Niki Lauda, for example, would be brilliant in a modern day F1 car? You don't know. Maybe he wouldn't have been, but in that particular era, he was exceptional. And vice versa. Maybe you put Max Verstappen in one of those old F1 cars, Ayrton Senna's Tolman around Monaco. Maybe he wouldn't be very good in that. You just don't know until you try it. And it's a very different, the sports cars back then was a very different way of driving, I guess. Probably more in line with the cars of today.
F1 cars.
Bigger, heavier car. Yeah, exactly. More ground effects. And you have to give the car a bit more time in the slower speed corners, but then you feel the downforce in higher speed. It comes alive there. And it had a big torquey engine, a big diesel V12 with 1,250 Newton meters of torque at 2,500 revs.
I don't even know what that means.
People that know what that means will go, wow.
Yeah, that sounds a lot.
Tow a jumbo jet in the thing. So it was a great car to ride. I loved it, and I just found this new avenue into my career, and by 2014 had won the world championship with Sebastian Buemi, but in the WEC World Endurance Championship.
And given the frustrations that there were in Formula One and the opportunities that didn't come their way, what did that 2014 championship mean to you?
It meant that I could hang my hat on something. I'd been driving my heart out since I was an 8-year-old kid, and all of the blood, sweat and tears that goes into it, to come away, and I knew at that point I could have retired at the end of 2014 and just gone, I did something. I've raced in Formula One and I became a world champion in sports cars, a category I fell in love with after F1 when I thought everything was lost. You come to the end of what you see as everything you'd ever pinned hopes on to get to Formula One. And when that comes tumbling down and the doors shut in your face, you worry that, well, I'm still in my 20s and what do I do now? How do I earn money? I want to drive something, but I wanted to do F1. To find then a new lease of life, to then fall in love with it so much and to win a world championship just felt like everything you had put your heart and soul into actually had meaning.
And it's been a wonderful chat. Thank you for your time. We're going to end this what I call the traditional way now. It's the question that I've been asking everybody on the pod this year. Formula One is 75 years old. Do you have a favourite memory in history? Could be anything.
Favourite memory in history? I think at the circuit, it would probably have to be standing on the banking at Stowe, 1987, with my dad, watching a Formula One race. I'd begged him, I'd been harassing him to come and see a Formula One race live. Used to sit down and watch TV with him all the time, watching the F1 race. I wanted to see it live. So he brought me along here in 1987 at Stowe. You know what happened, don't you?
I do. That's where he dummied Piquet, wasn't it? Mansell dummied Piquet.
Watched it live as a young kid who didn't need any more inspiration at all. To see that happen, that was it. For me, that was the moment. Mansell selling the dummy down into Stowe. I'd only just started karting myself, so I could have a small appreciation of what went into it that day. And that was such a boyhood memory that it's burnt into my mind. And I thank my dad to this day for taking me there and showing me what Formula One was really all about.
And thanks for your time.
Thank you.